Welcome back to Rumours Unboxed. That's right, we're going to tackle some of the GeForce 40 series rumours that have been going around for quite a while now. We believe we're not too far away from the launch, but I guess you could think we could just wait, I suppose, at this point, since we've waited so far. But every month we do our Q&A series, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and they're largely dominated by talk about rumours. Like, what do we think about this? What do we think about that? What are our expectations? Do we believe this is real? Yada, yada, so on and so forth. And they're usually quite heavily upvoted, quite popular, but we have, for the most part, avoided them. We've talked a little bit about expected power usage and stuff like that, or what 600 watts might mean for, you know, gamers. But when it comes to like specifications, performance, all that kind of stuff, we've ignored it, despite the fact that it's been largely upvoted because we've wanted to avoid rumours getting all muddled in the Q&As.
Yeah, we're just not really a rumor channel. Like, most of the content you see is testing of products that are released, but it sounds like you guys actually want to hear our thoughts on rumors for once. So here we are to talk about them. Yeah,
and on occasion, we talked about Zen 2 rumors and stuff like that, and I think even Zen 3 probably. So we've done a bit of this stuff in the past, but it's not the core focus of the channel. So today we are going to dive into the specs, talk about
supposed specs.
The alleged grain specs. Of salt. We will be digging a few grains of salt, but yes, we'll get into all of it, the rumors. But before we do,
today's video is sponsored by Gigabyte. The latest Aorus and Gigabyte gaming and creator laptops feature up to an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3080 Ti graphics card and up to 12th gen Intel Core i9 processors. This powerful combination of hardware is great whether you're a gamer or creator. Gamers will be interested in the Aorus 17X featuring high-performance GeForce RTX graphics, a super-fast 360Hz display, and heaps of cooling power. The RTX 3080 Ti model is very impressive in the speed it delivers for gaming in a laptop form factor, especially with DLSS enabled. Learn more via the links below, including the Remix contest where you can win an Aero 15 OLED laptop.
All right, so there are a few ways we could go about tackling this, what's going to be released when, or allegedly going to be released when. But I think what we'll do is we'll just start with the rumored products, so each SKU, and we'll talk about each one and go down the product stack and give our thoughts, opinions, all that sort of stuff as we do it. So we're going to start with what we expect to be the flagship model, the RTX 4090 Ti. So all of these GPUs will be based on the Ada Lovelace architecture, and it will be using the TSMC N4 node.
Yes. So a 5nm family node, but the sort of mid-refresh of that node is typically how that goes.
Yep.
So yeah, the 4090 Ti flagship part using potentially the AD102 die. So as we've seen with the Ampere generation, the 102 series tends to be the top-end silicon that's used for the consumer products. So I guess the rumors are currently suggesting that die will be split into two products, the 4090 Ti and the 4090, which is where sort of the whole power discussion comes in a bit, because there's kind of expectations that Ti model will be the sort of ridiculous, super power consuming, up to 800 watts, I think the rumors are suggesting.
Yep.
Whereas the 4090 is potentially going to be a more reasonable, I say reasonable with, you know, how reasonable 450 watts is questionable, but 450 watts is sort of the expectation that we're seeing there. So the top end model, rumors of a CUDA core count of 18,176. So that's about 70% more than the 3090 Ti. And then the 4090 would have 16,384. So about 56% more than the 3090. So a big uplift there in the core count for these parts.
Yep.
And then on top of that, we're also expecting quite a substantial clock speed increase, a rise from about 1.7 gigahertz to about 2.5 gigahertz, the rumors are suggesting, comparing the 4090 model to the 3090.
Yeah, the 4090 could be clocked a bit lower.
Possibly.
Again, rumors. What's
rumored, but big clock speed
based on what we're seeing from the alleged power usage, it would make sense that, like the 3090 Ti, the 4090 Ti is just pushed to the absolute brink of stability.
100%, yeah.
Whereas 4090, rather like the 3090, is slightly more reasonable.
Yeah, and of course those are the boost clock specifications. So the actual frequency it runs at is most likely going to be higher than that again. But that does represent, you know, a 47% clock speed increase, which is on top of the core increase is very substantial. And I'd say it's pretty rare to get both sort of a core count uplift of that size in addition to a clock speed increase of that size in the same generation.
Yeah.
And that's really where a lot of the rumors of 90 to 100% more performance, so the doubling of performance, comes from. And yeah, you can sort of see that from the specs.
Yeah, and the huge increase in power usage as well. So
Yeah.
So that's the 4090 Ti at this point. That's the leaked specifications. Did you mention, I think have 24 gigabytes of VRAM as well?
Yes, GDDR6X memory, I believe, is the rumors are suggesting 24 gig for the 4090, and I believe...
Which isn't shocking, really.
Like 48 is potentially the case on the cards for the TI model. I think it's important to note with these sort of higher-end, more flagship models that there's a lot of different configuration choices that NVIDIA can make for these products. I think something like a 3090 Ti, the current generation of Ampere, that may not have ever been planned when they first decided to release the Ampere generation, but because they realized, hey, we can do all these sorts of things with power and clock speeds and push it that little bit further, there's all sorts of options here. So I think that's why we've seen some of the rumors fluctuate a bit in terms of what that top-end product has looked like. Earlier there were talks of maybe it's only going to be 450 watts or 500 watts. We've seen talk of 600 watts and now even 800 watts.
Seems absurd, but
who knows what NVIDIA's actually going to decide out of that big range that they can choose from, because it's going to come down to competition and pricing and what people are willing to tolerate.
Yeah, stuff like yields as well, which is often why you see those extreme high-end parts that use the absolute best silicon possible. They come a year down the track because it gives them quite a bit of time to build up that inventory where they have parts that can hit those frequencies and sustain that kind of power usage without stability issues and all that. So I'm not sure what the rumor is for the 3090 Ti release date. I think that's a sort of to be decided.
The 4090 Ti.
Sorry, the 4090 Ti. To be decided. The 4090 is believed to be coming in Q4, so a couple of months from now. And then I think the 4080 and 4070 were also rumored to be released probably a month after each one. So by December, maybe.
I think there's been some conflicting reports of whether some of the products will be released early next year versus actually in this year. It's very hard to get firm information about that. I think we're pretty confident that some sort of product will be released this year, potentially around October.
Yeah, as close as to definitely as we can say.
Yeah,
all the rumblings in the industry are that is the expectation to happen. But yeah, as you said, we're not exactly sure what they'll go with. And we always knew the mid-range to low end would be coming earlier next year. So that's definitely still going to be the case. They're not going to rush everything out at once because that's not how these launches go. So we'll move down the product stack, as we said we would do, and we'll get to the RTX 4080, which is probably the high-end product that I'd say most of the audience will be interested in once these launch. Of course, that will be dependent on pricing and whatnot, as we always say, but hopefully the 4080 will be a good sweet spot high-end card. So the rumor at this point says that it will be on the AD103 die, so a smaller die presumably than the 4090, which would make sense. 16 gigabytes of 21 gigabits per second memory, so the same VRAM capacity as AMD's current generation flagship parts, so the 69 and 6800 series. So I think that's a pretty good spot for VRAM, but we can probably talk about that a bit more in a minute. 420 watts will be the power draw for that particular model. Again, it's rumored to come in Q4 2022, so in a matter of months from now. 10,240 CUDA cores, which is about 18% more cores than the 3080.
Yeah, but again, the expectation is that, like with the 4090, that we're also getting quite a substantial clock speed increase.
Yes.
We've seen some reports of time spy numbers. Now, we're not huge fans of using time spy for benchmarks. We prefer to use actual games. But, previously we were talking about the 4090 sort of being 90 to 100% faster than the 3090. We're sort of looking at around 50% more performance comparing the 4080 compared to the 3090, which would be quite a substantial uplift. But similar to what we've seen you know, we had for example, the 3090 come out this generation and provide about 50% more performance than the previous sort of around the high end sort of type products.
Yep.
So getting around 50% more performance in that tier, I think would be pretty solid. Obviously, you know, it's not going to be as much as the top end cards. You're not going to get double the performance at every price tier.
No,
obviously.
but it should be definitely power usage will be much more in check.
Yep.
420 watts is the rumored power usage, which, that's still a lot of power, but it's not 600 watts, it's not 800 watts, so it is more manageable. It's certainly going to be a high-end card that'll heat up a smallish room, or even a reasonable size room, really.
Bit of a space heater right there.
It is a bit of a space heater, but power is certainly more in check than what we've seen with the 4090 and 4090 Ti, and it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway because I know it'll come up in the comments, is that it really hinges on price as to how good it is. The price to performance thing is always the underlying factor there. Yeah,
and I think the rumored specifications for this product are looking pretty solid. I think the increase from 10 gigabytes of memory with the 3080, and they had a 12 gig model as well, I probably should mention.
Came in late and
the increase from 10 to 12 gig up to 16 gig, I think it feels a lot better. Like if that is what the product is going to be, that does feel like a much more reasonable amount of memory.
Well, it's going to be at least $700 US.
Yes.
At least it'll be at least that much.
Prices aren't going to go down.
No, they're not going to go down. I don't think it'll be necessarily as bad as what some people expect, but of course we ultimately don't know. But it's going to be a high-end product. We know that much. Yep. And I think when you're spending $700 or more at this point in time, really 16 gigabytes I think of memory is to be expected. Even 12 would be too skinny, too little VRAM there. Yep. So I think 16 gigabytes is certainly satisfactory. You don't need more than that for that class of card. I think that'll work well.
So the other card that we're sort of expecting more recently, because I don't think we'll really cover the RTX 4060 all that much. Well, there's no rumored specifications for that part just yet. But as far as the 4070, which to me is probably the card I'm most interested in, this is expected to be based on the 8104 silicon. So again, fairly standard there. We've seen that sort of tier GPU used for the 3070. 18 gigabits per second GDDR6 family memory. Not quite sure what that's going to end up as. The CUDA core count, 7,168 is what the current rumors are suggesting. So that's a 21% increase over the 3070. But again, like with the 4090 and 4080, we're expecting quite a substantial clock speed increase as well, which is, again, sort of why we're seeing a 300 watt power draw expectation for this product. And the performance expectation there is roughly around the RTX 3090 from this generation. So that's currently what they're expecting. We've also seen more recent rumors about potentially a 4070 Ti type product that would be the 8104 silicon fully unlocked and with potentially slightly more memory, slightly higher clock speeds, 400 watt power limit, and obviously slightly more performance to go along with all that stuff.
Yes, and I think although that's being, I know the 4070 Ti rumor popped up, I think just before we started filming this. This video will be going about a week after Tim and I have the discussion because we have other things to put out. But I think with these Ti models, especially the 4070 Ti, you're not going to see that anytime soon. So there's no date associated with that rumor or leak. I think that'll be a 6 to probably 12 month refresh deal.
It seems to me like it's another one of those possibility type product. You know how we were talking earlier about
NVIDIA
the 4090
keeps in their
Ti?
back pocket to see if they need it.
Yeah, like the 4090 Ti, they could go up to 800 watts with crazy specs, right? It sounds like the 4070 Ti rumors are talking about this is sort of what that silicon could do if NVIDIA really wanted to go all out with it. Again, I think it's the specifications of this product are quite interesting because what we're seeing is 3090 type performance without the CUDA core count increase. They're only going up by about, I think, 20% compared to the 3070. And a lot of that performance is supposedly coming from this big frequency increase, which I think is why we'll see that card around 300 watts instead of... Now, you can sort of go, okay, 3090 is a 350 watt product. How come the 4070 is on 300 watts even though we're on this new node? Like, surely 5 nanometer family compared to what Samsung 8 nanometer should be giving us this big increase to performance per watt. But when you push frequencies that high up on a product like this, which is using that many CUDA cores, you're going to start shifting the position in the voltage frequency curve that you're sitting in. It's less efficient to run
you're well out of the efficiency window, which is exactly what we see with the 3090 Ti opposed to 3090.
Yeah.
It uses much more power than you'd expect for the performance uplift that you get.
Yeah, so I think if we saw a 4070 type product that was instead a similar core count to the 3090 and similar clock speeds, but on 5 nanometer, we would see that product use less power than 300 watts. The reason why they've gone this route, or route if you're American,
cheaper,
is that, it's a smaller die. So companies prefer to produce a smaller die with fewer CUDA cores and try and clock them a lot higher because they can produce more dies per wafer that they end up getting. So,
and gamers love triple and quad slot cards.
They just love it.
The bigger the, I know we sort of say that sarcastically, but I think the bigger the graphics card, the more proud you are of the investment. At least a lot of gamers. I know a lot of people in our comment section will be talking a lot more about power usage and efficiency, which, that's good, and we care about that stuff as well. But I think gamers in general don't care nearly as much as what the hardcore enthusiast gamer crowd likes to make out, which is not a knock on you guys that care about power. I just think gamers in general don't care that much. The bigger it is, the more badass it is, I guess.
I think there is some consideration with power up to the point where you start needing to think about all the other components in your system. Like if you had an 800 watt GPU, you're going to have to start thinking about, do I replace my power supply? Is my are the circuits in my house suitable? Do I need air conditioning for the room? But I think a lot of that stuff doesn't really, it doesn't sound like it's going to apply to the more mainstream products that people are going to buy.
Yep.
So the 4080 at the rumored 420 watts is getting up there. Like that's starting to become a bit unrealistic, a bit, people are going to struggle with that sort of product. But 300 watts for a product like a 4070 sounds... it could be better, but it's
very
okay.
manageable. It's very manageable.
And so long as we're seeing a performance per watt increase compared to the 3090 that is the same performance tier, then that's a step in the right direction. Yeah,
of course, this conversation changes a lot if NVIDIA's competitor, Intel's moving on. If the Radeon 7000 series comes out and offers a similar level of performance while using much less power, then that does become a real pro of that generation. There's a lot of other things to consider as well. But like I said, 400 watt graphics card, that will heat up a lot of gaming rooms and make them uncomfortable. So if you can get the same performance at a noticeably lower temperature, which room temperature due to power usage, then that may be enticing. But we're not necessarily saying that will be the case. I'm just saying that I think that discussion becomes more important then. Opposed to now it's like, well, I don't really want an 800 watt card, so you don't spend $2,000 or whatever the absurd price for the 4090 Ti is going to be, and buy a 4080 or a 4070.
And while the 4070 will have a much higher power consumption level than the 3070, which was a 220 watt card, a lot of cards around that mark are sort of around that 300 watt mark. So we've got the 3070 Ti, which was 290 watts. The RTX 3080 was 320 watts. And it's looking like the 4070 will comfortably outperform both of those cards. So again, maybe people have, I don't want to say unrealistic expectations of what a new architecture and new nodes can actually do. But when it comes to claims of doubling performance like we're hoping we'll get with the 4090, it's very unlikely that was going to come with doubling of the performance per watt. Because generally speaking, when you update your node, and I know it's kind of hard because we're talking about Samsung versus TSMC across 1.5, maybe 2 generations of nodes. Getting double the performance per watt is pretty hard to achieve with those sorts of uplifts. So it was always going to be the case with these products where to achieve that doubling, they were going to be pushing the power much higher, making much larger, well, maybe not larger, but many more CUDA cores, high frequencies, all those sorts of things to achieve those sorts of performance improvements. It's just that the new node allows you to do all of that stuff. It's more dense, so you can put all those CUDA cores in. It potentially allows you to actually clock that many transistors higher, which gives you those benefits. So like we were sort of saying in some of the Q&As earlier in this year, as long as they're not going backwards in performance per watt, And they're not just going, oh, we're going to make these cards 400 watts and go crazy on it and make them super inefficient. So long as they are a better product than the previous generation, I think that sounds acceptable to me.
Yeah, having said that, I think if they went backwards, but there was a price saving there, then people
Possibly,
probably be a bit happier about it, but I'm not suggesting that would be the case. I think these conversations have been largely dominated by a focus on these rumoured extreme high-end 4090 Ti class products.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas in reality, like we've just seen, the sort of mid-range performance segment looks like it's still going to be around 400 watts, 350, 400, maybe 450.
Mid to high end, to be clear, with like a 3080, with 4080, sorry.
I was talking, yeah. So that's certainly much more manageable. But whether it's, I guess my point is, whether it's 300 watts or 350 watts, it's at the end of the day, it's not going to make a huge difference. As we've been saying, really, it's the price to performance that you're going to care about, which will make or break that product.
Yeah, and if we're seeing a 4070 that's at 300 watts, it's very likely that, you know, the 4060 Ti, it's very hard to get around these product names so early. You haven't got the practice in yet.
No, doesn't roll off the tongue yet.
You know, you would be looking at probably 4060 Ti at like 250 watts, 4060 at like 200 watts, and those sorts of things are like, they don't sound as good as back in the Pascal era where the thought of a 300 watt GPU was still, you know, miles away.
Yep.
But I think those sorts of numbers would be perfectly reasonable for most users. And again, as we've talked about, you increase power, you increase the performance, and as long as the performance is better, most people are going to tolerate that to some degree.
Yep.
So
that's all of the rumoured products at the moment from the 40 series. And I think just to cap it off, I think the 4070, the 4080, and the 4090 are all rumoured for a Q4 2022 release. So over the coming months. That's what's expected at this point. What they end up doing, no idea. I know there's been a lot of focus on the 4090 Ti, but I wouldn't have thought they'd lead with that. But again, as Tim said, there's many options for them, and we're not exactly sure which way they're going to go. But we're certainly expecting something from the 40 series this year. So I know there was talk of it being delayed by a year, but we're certain that's not the case. And all indications, all the people we've talked to in the industry, that is absolutely not going to be the case. So I guess the next part we can sort of shift into to round this out is talking a bit about, well, probably not so much pricing, because
it is what it is.
Well, we don't know pricing and it can change last minute, but I think more availability. We can talk a bit about availability, what our expectations are there, what the market's doing, what's changed since the previous generation, and just really what to expect on availability. So I guess to expect on availability, which is what we always try to emphasize every time we have these discussions, because what's almost certain to happen is, let's say they lead with the 4080 like they did the 3080. It comes out, the performance is 50, 100%, whatever greater it may end up being, and the price is right, and it all looks pretty fantastic. People go berserk after watching the reviews, and no matter how much inventory they have, it's not going to be enough. It never is for these releases. They're all going to sell out. So you'll definitely see scalpers and all that stuff. But because there isn't the demand from cryptocurrency mining, we fully expect, I would say, no more than 2 months. And again, this is just guesswork. But within about 2 months after release, you should be able to just go and buy one pretty well at the MSRP. That's certainly the hope, the expectation. Traditionally, it's been a minimum of 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. I think depends on it. Yeah, there's a few other factors there we don't know. Like there's a lot of demand these days, but I'm sure they know that and they've increased and how much they will have.
You know, we're sort of in a weaker economic climate at the moment than previous years with all the talk of recession and stuff. So, you know, it's very hard to sort of pin down this is how much stock they're going to have and how much demand there is. But I think the previous generation has very much been an anomaly. At least that's all the indications that we're seeing in terms of pricing trends, the ability for people to even sell the current stock that they've got at, you know, relatively low prices for some models. And obviously, as you talked about, the cryptocurrency mining issue being not really a factor at the moment. You know, it'd be very surprising if it came down to stock not being available for 6 months to a year. So that's very unlikely.
Can't see that happening.
I think something that we'll be looking out for, and I expect a lot of reviewers that we'll be looking out for, is the sort of fake MSRP thing again, because it could be another case where NVIDIA launches these products and they have a product that's, say, $500, and that's only available in the first wave, and then suddenly all the AIB models come out and they're all priced at $600. That's something that potentially will happen with this generation.
Could do.
They sort of have been testing the waters a little bit. We've seen products like the 3050 and 3060 from the current generation, even today, aren't sold at the MSRP, which points to that sort of being a bit fake looking on the MSRP front. But that's certainly something that we'll be looking out for, and something that, yeah, I hope that NVIDIA and AMD decide not to go with. But
I expect due to less demand, there's certainly going to be less demand, and there will be more competition than ever. Like the GPU wars should be peaking for this generation, I would have thought.
yeah, make it harder for them to get away with something like that.
Definitely. And AMD has to be hungry at this point to have the kind of rise and success with Radeon.
Yep.
So I don't expect them to be undercutting NVIDIA aggressively, but yeah, they'll be wanting to sell GPUs. They'll be wanting to claim more market share, certainly a lot more market share than they currently have. But we'll see. Again, they're not going to have the supply constraints they had with the Radeon 6000 series. I'm sure they would have been much more aggressive with that series had they not had to share all of that silicon with pretty much everything else they're making at the time.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll see how that one plays out. But
certainly don't get in a bit of a tiz as soon as they're sold out and say, oh, you know, it's a repeat all over again. They're definitely going to sell out straight away. It's just when will you see these resupplies happening and basically them catch up to all the people that wanted one no matter what straight away, which I'm anticipating to be 1 to 2 months.
yeah, I mean, a product like the RTX 2070 and 2080, which weren't received the best, that Turing generation, especially for those products, was fairly middling. Even those cards sold out like straight away and weren't available, and there was plenty of supply. There was demand. Demand was relatively normal at that time, and the reception wasn't amazing. It's still sold out. So
yeah, and
that's just something.
They were able to keep the 2080 Ti prices inflated for the most part for pretty much the life of that product, because that was it. You want a fast GPU, you want a game at 4K. Well, pay the premium 2080 Ti. There was nothing from AMD. 5700 XT was really as good as it got. That was the Radeon 7, but that didn't even compete that well with the RTX 2080. Turns out it was a good investment because you could have sold it for an absolute mint to a miner. Yeah, fully expect that will be the case. So don't panic. Just sit back and be patient. Hopefully you won't have to wait too long. But of course, if you absolutely want one, you're going to have to pounce on it.
Yeah. And I think that's also important for people thinking of buying cheaper current generation cards. There's been
that's a good point.
Some talk of whether you should buy now or whether you should wait, and I certainly think both of us believe you should be waiting.
Well, if these rumored specs are even remotely true, waiting a few months is going to pay dividends.
Yeah, if you're buying a 3090 Ti for $1,500 or a 3090 for $1,300 right now, and it's soon to be superseded in. And again, who knows what the price is going to be for a 4090 type product, but
we don't know.
I expect
that to be
$1,500 maybe.
If you just paid $1,500 for a 3090 Ti, I expect the results to be brutal.
Yeah, because if it's the next gen cards coming in a couple of months, it's going to be twice as fast.
So they're saying 4070 Ti, so 4070 won't be that much slower than a 3090 Ti, but it could be half the price, less than half the price.
Yeah, so that you get burnt if you bought now.
Wow.
Those sorts of products.
It's going to be very interesting to see towards the end of the year, but yeah, you could be looking at throwing out half of the value of that card within a matter of months. So
and
I don't think it's worth the gamble, which is why we've been saying if you want a card now, something like an RX 6600, it's very cheap now. You're going to lose maybe $100 by year's end. But a 3090 Ti or a 3090,
yeah, it's going to be pretty
I wouldn't like to be in that position. So it's just not worth the risk because they're not going to run out.
And they're not going to run out of 3090 Ti's to buy. Like what we're currently hearing from people involved with stock,
you have to go
is that
there's a
lot of stock.
Yeah, nobody's saying anything but that. They're like, there's a lot
of cards to be sold. So when it comes to the point when NVIDIA decides to announce these products and they're starting to give performance expectations, that is typically and historically has been when there's a big rush to try and sell the previous generation before it tanks even harder than it currently is tanking. So if you are interested in sort of that high-end product, you should really be thinking about what's the price to performance, how's that card going to sit in the next generation. So if the 3090 is going to be massively outperformed by the 4090 and is more going to be around the 4070, then you should be thinking about, okay, so what's sort of the price going to be like for a 4070? What's my expectations? That is now the new acceptable price for the 3090.
If they creep up the naming scheme again, it'll be $700 US.
Yes.
Which is less than half the price of what you would, or roughly half the price of what you would pay for a 3090 Ti right now.
Yeah, it's like I'm not, as I've talked about, I'm not very concerned about the naming creep at all. I don't think it's
price of
a significant issue at all. But yeah, you'd feel burnt if you bought a 3090 right now and it becomes half the price. So
just not worth the gamble. We do not expect those cards to sell out in the next 2 months.
No.
So
no, it's not going to be like the previous generation where.
But even the previous generation, they were selling 2080 Ti's to make way for the 3070. So realistically, the smartest investment would have been, well, assuming you couldn't get a 3070 at the MSRP, which how many people manage that?
Not many.
You would have been best off getting a 2080 Ti for $500.
Yep.
And you could still sell that for a good amount. Well, you could have sold it for a great amount of money about a year ago or less than a year ago.
Well, I think what a lot of people are sort of, a lot of the fear that's coming into this is the fear that what happened last generation where, cards were cheap for like a couple of months. And then as soon as people realize that there's no stock of anything, suddenly all those old cards creep back up in price.
Yeah.
Which is very unlikely to happen this generation.
That's right. But even then, it still becomes a buyer's market.
Yeah.
So you still wanted to be the person that took the advice of wait a few months and see what happens. And you wanted to buy the 2080 Ti for $500, not sell it for $500.
Yes, that's right.
So regardless, even if that was to repeat this time, you still want to wait and buy the person who goes, oh my God, the 4070 is going to match my 3090 Ti. Got to get rid of that because I want to buy a 4090 or a 4080 or whatever. And you get that nice and cheap.
Yes, there's two periods to buy current generation cards, which will soon be the old generation cards, which is, as we've been talking about, after NVIDIA announces the product, but before they're released, is when you see all that panic selling of people trying to match the old cards' price to performance to the new cards. Then during that period where products are likely going to be unavailable for 1 to 2 months, that's the time not to panic and suddenly go, oh, I need to buy a card right now because they might start going up in price. If you've waited that long, you're probably going to be able to get an even better deal by waiting until the 40 series is widely available, because once they're widely available, then the 30 series is just going to fall off a cliff in terms of pricing.
Oh, they'll be flooded.
So
the market will be flooded with them.
You know, there's a lot of talk of used GPUs as well. There's still a lot of big backlog of used GPUs from mining and various other things to come into the market. So you don't need to panic whatsoever on GPU prices this generation by the sounds of things.
Yeah, look, if they manage to achieve a 50% performance uplift at the same price point, based on the polling data from 60-something thousand subscribers, we know that's when pretty much the majority of our audience makes the upgrade. So what you've just said will definitely ring true. There'll be so many of those 30 series cards on places like eBay because people have decided to upgrade. So anyway, that's sort of the rumors as they are now. I know we don't usually cover this stuff, but we thought Tim and I managed to get together today. We had to do a few other things, and we thought we'd talk about this because a lot of people on Discord keep asking. The Q&As are always dominated by, talk about rumors and stuff. We try to avoid them for the Q&As. So here's that video.
So I guess the disclaimer is that a lot of what we've talked about in this video is a rumor. So we're not sort of saying that what the rumors are true or anything. We don't know for the vast majority of these things ahead of time what tends to be the case. And as well with these, we're still relatively early, like we're still several months away from the products from being launched. So there's still a lot of maneuvering that NVIDIA can do in terms of finalizing those products. So whether or not they launch the super high powered card, the exact pricing, the exact specifications can still be tweaked between now and the release. And a lot of that will come down to the competition. So what AMD is doing as well will determine how crazy NVIDIA goes with specs and with pricing. So I think that's a very important disclaimer, because a lot of people, when you talk about rumors, will go when the final product is released and be like, oh, that's not what the rumors said. And it's like, well, NVIDIA still has a lot of decisions to make at this point as to what the products will be. So again, potentially not final. But anyway, that's the rumors.
Yep. So rumor unboxed end.
Yeah.
We are done. Hopefully, for those of you who have wanted us to talk about this stuff for quite some time now, we're satisfied with that. And well, those of you who don't like Rumours probably didn't watch this video, and you'll be happy that we kept the Q&As, you know, largely clean of rumour type content. So yeah, that's going to do it for this one. We have Floatplane Patreon if you want to become a Harbourbox community member and badger us day in, day out to talk about stuff like this. We could probably talk about it more on the Discord a bit more freely there. We do live streams, Tim and I get together, and we actually discuss stuff like this a bit more openly as well on live streams. Yep. Q&As, behind the scenes content. Tim's building a new studio. Some good footage there. Tim's making you're coming up to your third BTS video now on.
Yep.
I'm building a studio. You've been putting insulation in and wearing your full body suit to stop getting itchy and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of things going on. But yeah, I'm super keen to get into the benchmarking. I think this next generation is going to be one of the best in maybe forever, or for as long as relevant. I don't want to call it early, but it looks exciting. It sounds exciting. Let's hope it is. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.